Wow. Like Becky said, novela. I love it. Yes, the Bible is full of spiciness. It's incredible. But it is also a reminder that we are just like them. And God, what he has done before, he can do again. And he's doing it in our lives every day. God chose Esther to be in that specific place in a particular time. And it's funny because we read it in short pieces and we think it's happening fast. But this took years, right? Just like in our journey. We can look back from when we first started walking with God to where we are now. There was a lot of bumps. There was a lot of steps. There was a lot of detours. And Esther went through that too, right? She was a virgin who was basically human trafficked, but she was given favor by God. And then she, was in this wonderful position, but then obviously certain things probably came her way. And then Mordecai was like, hey, your people are going to get killed here, so you're going to do something about it? You imagine the weight on her of that. That was a lot. Because think about it. The enemy is all about comfort. Isn't it easier to just stay where you are and not do anything? As opposed to actually stand up and speak up for God and do the things that he has called you to do. And that was the battles that she was going through, right? That was her issues in terms of the comfort and the luxury. Think about it. She was years as a queen. When this issue came about with Haman wanting to kill all the Jews, she was living good. She was probably thinking for a moment. That's probably why Mordecai had to remind her, eventually he's going to figure out you're Jewish too, and he's going to come after you, right? So those are the kinds of things that she was probably like, okay, this is good. This is not too bad. But then she realized that is not the right thing. And God put her in that position from the beginning for a purpose. She had endured so much and been away from her culture and her family for a long time. Think about it. You have been, I attribute it to like the diaspora, right? Remember, the Jews were in exile at the time, but the people who've left their different countries, Cuba, Nicaragua, other things for political issues. And they get here and they're very comfortable. Sometimes you forget all that you went through and all the things that are still happening back in your own country. That happened to her. She was in her groove. She was in her element. She was a part of everything that was there. But God, he reminded her who she was. He put people in her life. He reminded her of the favor and basically allowed her to be that part of the story. And like Becky mentioned, if it wasn't her, God would have picked somebody else. When you don't do what God asks you to do, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It just means he's going to find someone else who's ready. All right? So that's what we want to remember. We want to make sure that we put ourselves in Esther's place here, because she is us. We are her. We are not different. She was just like any of us. If we read, because now we're going to get into the Haman issue, right? The evil guy in the story. Gosh, Haman. That guy was like, you don't wish evil on people, but when his stuff came about, I was like, yes. It was one of those times of like, okay, good job, God. So, as mentioned before, Haman really didn't like Mordecai. And from that one guy, he decided he wants to make sure that all the Jewish people were killed. Okay? And we've seen, unfortunately, Jewish people get encountered with this over and over. You've seen the Holocaust. You see it now. People don't want them alive. And we can't pretend that this is a new problem. This has been going on since the beginning of time, right? This is one of those times. And Haman was doing all this, and Esther had fasted and prayed, and Mordecai had given her the advice, and she was ready to go. She started getting bold, right? She was like, all right, I'm going to do something. I don't know what it's going to be. I may be killed, but I'm going to make sure I'm a part of it. Esther 7:3-4. The queen answered. Jake. The queen answered, if I have found favor with you. She was talking now to her husband Xerxes. She was telling him, if I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. So remember, there was lots of wives and concubines, and you couldn't just go, right, to go see the king. You might have been killed if you weren't invited, and that was the scene that you saw, right? She was like, no, I really got to talk to you. And everybody was like, all right, we're going to kill her because she's coming without your invitation. But because of favor God had on her, he went ahead and was bold, and she did it. And that was a very big thing for her. Look how wonderful it turned out, thankfully. He did listen to her, thankfully. He loved her. He was like, okay, she has integrity. She was the one who helped me with Mordecai, telling him about, trying to be killed. So she already had credit with him. So she didn't know, but we knew now that he really trusted her. And because of that trust, he listened to her, thankfully. Because now we read in Esther 7:7, Haman was terrified before the king and queen, right? So she talked about this whole issue with Haman. Then the king got up in rage, left his wine, and went out to the palace garden. But Haman, the bad guy, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. So Haman had put out this authority to kill all the Jewish people. Mordecai told Esther about it. Esther went to her king, and she told him about it. But she did this in a way that was like, how can I explain this? In her terms. She invited him to dinner. She invited the king to dinner and Haman to dinner. And they're like, yay, Queen Esther's going to give us dinner. This is awesome. It's going to be a great party. It's going to be great. And she did. She let them come to her, it's good advice. When you're fighting a battle, sometimes you need to have it on your terms, right? You need to have it on your territory. Same kind of thing. Esther did the same thing. She invited them over. She gave them dinner. And then it's like, what do you need? Oh, no, it's all right. I'm going to tell you. And when she shared it with the king, it's what got him so upset. Because think about this. Imagine giving authority to somebody to do something for you. And without you knowing, they did something as evil as plan the death of a whole people. That's what Haman did. He had the authority of the king. The king said, here, you have my authority. You have my seal. And he said, okay, kill all the Jews. Here we go. Take it. And everybody was like, oh, great. This is not good. Esther, of course, stepped in. The king had no clue. He really had no idea. And when that occurred, that's when all heck broke loose. We'll say heck, right? And Haman became terrified. He knew the king was going to do something about it. And he decided to beg Queen Esther for his life. Now, King Xerxes had stepped out of the room. You can see where this continues to be a novella, right? Novellas are like for real. I think they read the Bible and make their own scenes, right? Xerxes has stepped out, just angry, right? Angry of all this happening. And Queen Esther was behind, and Haman was like, basically, look, I need to beg you. Like, don't let King Xerxes kill me. And she was just sitting there on her couch probably thinking, this is my version. This doesn't say this exactly in the Bible. I'm thinking my version, yep. This is what's going to happen to you. Well, basically, he went after her, and scholars are back and forth on this. Some scholars say that he trips on top of her. Other scholars say that with his character, you can assume that he was trying to go after her, maybe possibly sexually assaulting her. And we read in Esther 7:8, just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, will he even molest the king while she was with me in the house? So he was already mad at Haman because Haman was abusing his authority. And then he comes back and he sees him on top of his wife. That's not going to go over well. But you notice how God allows those things sometimes? If you just sit back, people who are doing things to you or things that they shouldn't kind of dig their own hole. You just sit back long enough, God will take care of it. And this is exactly what is happening here. Haman did his own downfall. He was lying. He did things out of anger and egotism and all these issues. And Esther, with her integrity, just told the truth and then let God do his thing. Esther 7:9-10. As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Basically, he went after him. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs, attending the king, said, "A pole reaching to a height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had set it up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. The king said, 'Impale him on it.' So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided." So won't God use the things that was meant to hurt you to the people that are going against God? That is amazing. He is in every single detail. But she didn't do it. Like, she didn't say, "Hey, why don't you go put him on the pole?" No, 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 no. All of this, she probably didn't even know there was a pole out there. But God had a way. He's not going to be mocked. God will not be mocked. And if that is what was supposed to be used to go against God's people, God is going to use it against those who are against God's people. So always, like Becky said, like Gladys said, we want to sit back and let God do his thing. We do not want to run in front of God and get in his way. Side note, do you know that the edict that Haman made, that all the Jews were to be killed, could not be overturned? Because it was by authority of the king, not even the king could do it. So now what? Well, God can do anything. He can take any situation, and turn it for our good. That law couldn't be overturned, but Mordecai and Esther and all of them got together and decided, let's make a new law. We're going to let the Jews arm themselves. We're going to let them get together, make their own armies, and we're going to allow them to defend themselves because they didn't have that before. That was not in the law. They were not allowed to defend themselves. I guess they had their own Second Amendment. So it was put into law that they were allowed to defend themselves. So when the people came to kill them, guess what? They can't say it. They kicked butt. They really won. They took over, and they did such a good job, and they scared everybody so much. We'll read here, Esther 8:17. In every province and in every city to which the edict of the king came, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. So not only did they save themselves and were able to save their race, they actually brought in other people into the Jewish faith. So this whole thing of people outside of the faith or people of God has been going on since Old Testament. Many people think that, it's only when Jesus came that the Gentiles were invited. The Gentiles have been invited since the beginning, and this is one of those opportunities. When the Jews won and defended themselves, they put all of the Medo-Persia in awe. And they're like, we want to be Jewish too, right? That's where it's at. So they not only defended the faith, not only did they do amazing things, they won people for God. And all that from the boldness of Esther. From that moment of going to the king. Think about it. All of that rode on that one moment. To her going to the king and said, can I talk to you? Without you killing me? And when she did, God did it. God does it. He's in every little moment of your life. He's in every step. You may not recognize it now, but when you look back, think 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, something that God orchestrated that you could have never even have thought of. But now you see his hands in it. So where did this boldness of Esther come from? God made her who she was, and her fortitude, I'm sure, was genetic. And I'm sure it came from her culture and her parents, and obviously being raised by Mordecai. Mordecai was a tough guy. Right? He was strong in his faith, and he didn't worship anybody but God. He was definitely a man of faith. Her faith culture was strong. Her people have been through so much already. All she knew was perseverance, right? But all of that came from God. I know some of us are very strong ladies, have been through a lot. There's stories here that I know personally that is amazing to me, that you could be sitting here with such peace, that it only comes from God. I wish you all knew each other's stories, but God knows your story, and he knows every pain, every tear, every cry. He knows everything that has made you who you are today. And he will continue to do it, because the God of yesterday is the same God as today is tomorrow. Just because you went through something before doesn't mean you're not going to do it again, but it's also going to be another opportunity for a testimony. Esther used her circumstances, her background, her family, her friends, her boldness to be one of the few women featured in the Bible. And it's not just because she's important to the history of God's people, but it's because she's just like us. She brushed her hair. She probably cared about her weight. She probably had to pluck a few hairs here and there. We all have our things, right? We all are women, but we're all daughters of the King. You are Esther. I am Esther. We're Esther. And when you take a look at her characteristics, she had favor from God. She had listened to advice from the trusted people. And she had the boldness in her faith to do the right thing. Esther was fab. Fab. She was fab. Fabulous. And don't forget that. You are as well. Maybe not all the time. We all have our moments. But we want our moments of fabulousness to be more than the ones that are not. And that's why we encourage each other. We make sure that we keep in tabs on each other. Hey, how are you doing? You doing good, right? We invite each other to ladies' nights and make sure that we study the Word and that we are all on this. So I want you all to do something for me. Put your crown on. Leave it there for a second. Yeah, well, I don't have to. Put your crown on your head. And I don't know what yours might be. Mine's going to be, I actually like platinum. Mine's going to be platinum with diamonds. All right, or maybe it's just gold. Maybe it's a circle. Or tiara. Maybe it's a tiara. But hold it there for a second. Reflect for a moment. What is the favor that God has in your life? What are some things that you do that don't make sense to others? That it was a crown that he gave you that favor. What advice have you listened to that has put you on God's path? Who's in your life that gives you that advice? Put them in your crown. And think about your boldness. When are you going to be bold for God? Are you going to tell somebody next to you who's never known God how much he loves them? Have you stood up for what is right? God gave you that crown. Every stone, every scratch. Some of them are a little bent, but that makes them more beautiful. All right, let's pray together. And I want to have this prayer time.